I have a cold open.
You do?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. I failed you. I did not find time since the last time we recorded to watch Joe versus Volcano.
I'm very, very disappointed in you. Although I have to say that I didn't watch That Thing You Do either.
Of course you didn't.
We'll have to put that off until the next episode.
Challenge reissued. Challenge reissued.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, right. There we go.
So every time I say put the theme song here, you leave me saying put the theme song here.
I like it. I like the behind the curtain peeks.
It's not what I meant, but here's the theme song. Welcome to Your Aleatoric Reality, the podcast that gives you 0% cash back on all your purchases.
Sweet. Why? We should incorporate that somehow.
We implicitly give everyone on Earth 0% cash back on all their purchases.
Yes.
As does every government,
No, I meant we should raise
business, and individual.
No, my favorite thing that I ever left in that you didn't want left in an episode was your robotic noises impression.
Because I talked about that director leaving Todd Rundgren the only one doing the fake theremin sounds.
Yep, that was totally that was great.
It was well received. It made sense. It was appropriate. So if this is your first time joining us, hi, welcome. Thanks for listening. Please give us a 5-star review and tell everyone you know that this is the best podcast you ever heard, even though the hosts don't know how to say podcast. Podcast. But lying is fun, so please tell everyone this show is great and tell them to listen to it.
There you go.
I have a listener email. The title, it's from Kat, who I could just sit here and pretend that it was just some random person who listens that emailed me, but Kat is my friend from Pennsylvania. She's married to my other friend Scott from Pennsylvania.
And not an actual cat.
She's not a feline. She's a human being. My friend Scott is not married to an actual cat. He's married to a metaphorical cat. And she's wonderful. And she watched Joe versus the Volcano with me and Scott when I was there.
Willingly.
And she listens to this podcast just in the background, so she feels like she's hanging out with me, which I think is really adorable. And if you want to feel like you're hanging out with Kat, you can also hear her on her podcast. Well, she's on a podcast. There's 3 hosts, and it is called 1980s Now. And they talk about the most day-glow decade, the 1980s. They talk about pop culture from the 80s. They talk about what's happening in the news that relates to the 80s. One time they name dropped my nephew's stepfather, which was a very bizarre moment when I'm listening to Kat's podcast and they mentioned this name and I'm like, oh, that's funny. They're talking about a guy who has the same name as, wait a minute, they are talking about my nephew's stepdad.
But not in that context.
Yeah. Anyhow, so Kat sent an email after she heard the Oblique Strategies episode.
Oh, okay.
And she said one of the cards that we drew and mentioned was honor thy error as a hidden intention. Mm-hmm. And she said all she could think of was Pee Wee Herman saying, I meant to do that. Which is certainly an apt interpretation of that card. Thank you, Kat, so much for sending an email. And the rest of you, go out and listen to 1980s Now. It's fun. So the news that I have, which is maybe not new news because it's probably from the 1800s, but I was alerted to this news story. I was alerted by Scott. Basically, all of the good content of this show comes from my friends Scott and Kat.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Step it up, Damon. All of the good content comes from outside of us.
Right. We just channel Scott and Kat.
It's not true.
I have never seen any empirical data, nor have I seen evidence that either of them exist. So,
wait, am I the robot? Am I just a robot programmed to think it's a human that has friends?
I think you might be in a cult.
Referencing, of course, episode 15. Go back and listen to that one. That was a hoot. So, how much do you know about the Moravian Church?
The Moravian Church?
Moravian. Have you ever heard of the Moravian Church?
No.
I think it's the most populous nowadays in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. But it was originated in Bohemia in the 15th century. It's one of the earliest Protestant churches that still exists.
Where's Bohemia now?
Czech Republic, I think, something like that.
Or California?
One of the two.
Oh, that's just the Grove, right?
John Hus was a precursor to the Protestant Reformation. He had a huge influence on the Moravian Church. They were initially formed as the Bohemian Brethren and evolved into the Moravian Church during the 18th century. Now, some interesting things about this church is that they place a lot of emphasis on missionary work, and they were among the first Christians to travel extensively around like the Caribbean and Greenland and North America to spread Christianity, which I guess makes them bad by like modern standards.
I think it just depends on how they did it.
They went around telling people what to think. Who needs that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that anybody did it good, but some people did it worse.
That's true. It's true. I don't know how they did it.
Have a blanket.
But they also have their church governance is a combination of clergy and lay people that work together to organize and decide the future of the church, I guess. But the part that concerns us is that it came to light in this tour. There's an adults-only tour about, it's in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, about Moravian life, particularly around like marriage and sex.
Okay.
And the very interesting bit is that if you wanted to get married, I don't know if they still do this, we'll have to research that, but like back in the 1700s, if you were in the Moravian church and you wanted to get married, you went to the clergyman and you said, you know, we two want to be married. And he would say, okay, I'll get the can. And they get this little cylinder can out and they shake it up and you reach in there and you pull out a slip of paper. And the slip of paper could say, ja, because they're German immigrants, right? The paper, one of the papers says ja, one of the papers says nein, which if you don't know is yes and no in German. And one of the papers is blank. And if you pull the nein, those two people can never get married.
Wow.
If you pull the ja, yes, you must get married right now.
Okay.
And if you pull the blank paper, you're not going to get married now, but you can come back and ask again later. Because they wanted... Because if you heard my voice dwindling in volume, we had a minor equipment malfunction here. My microphone was drooping, and I didn't notice until Damon yanked it away. We might need to cut this part out. I say that, and Damon will never cut parts out that I say to cut out.
It feels dishonest.
But everyone loves to lie.
Yeah.
Don't they?
So are all of the hymns of this church written by Queen?
Because they come from Bohemia.
Bad joke.
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Bad joke.
Well, we're going to have to start calling it Moravian Rhapsody now.
Okay.
All right. Good old Freddie Mercury and his Moravian Rhapsody. Yeah, so they wanted God to have a say in this decision, so they devised this little can full of answers that you reach into. But you know what we say here on this podcast, what's the difference between divination and random decisions? Nothing.
Right.
So that is a very clear example of random reality in a very like serious situation where it's like who you're going to spend your life with had an element of randomness.
Just makes you think like the modern church, they'd be like, well, we got rid of the can. We felt it was a little archaic. So how do we find out who gets married? Well, we have this magic 8-ball.
Yeah. That's going to be my listener challenge this week is get married by magic 8-ball.
There you go.
Use your magic 8-ball to decide on your next romantic partner.
All signs point to yes.
Or if you're married and you're thinking about getting something on the side, consult the magic 8-ball. Don't tell them I told you to do it, but
there you go.
You're a free being. You can do that.
No, when
if
you
want.
said it was the adult tour specifically about sex, I was like, did you have to put your keys in a fishbowl?
I didn't go on the tour.
Okay.
Scott sent me this news story about the tour, which alerted me to the fact that
Scott is looking.
He called it O Fortuna Matrimony.
Oh, speaking of.
Yes, we do have a portrait of Fortuna that Damon got for headquarters here. And if you join our Patreon, hey, great reason to plug the Patreon. If you join the Patreon, you'll be able to see a photo of that portrait of Fortuna that we have here at headquarters, overlooking our every move and guiding us. So when the show sucks, it's because Fortuna decided it was going to suck at that moment. And when the show's great, we can't take credit. All the glory goes to Fortuna. And so check out our Patreon, because that's not the only thing there. There's other stuff. We post stuff.
There's content.
There's content there. You can hear Damon's Tijuana story. We put outtakes on there. We put extra bits. It's fun. It's not that expensive. Go do it and help us out.
Well,
help us expand this show, because when we get some revenue going here, we're going to bring this adventure to your town, provided that your town comes up on the die roll. Because we'll put who are the Patreon subscribers, who are where do they want us to go, and we'll roll for which one we go to.
Well, assuming they want us to go there.
Right. If you don't want us to go there, you could list your enemy's city.
Yep.
And say, go to this city and go to this guy's house and talk your nonsense at him, Buckwheat. Yeah, that's what you should do. Join the Patreon. It's fun. You like it. You like to do that. Okay, well, we're going to roll for a topic now. I am going to need your 5-sider.
I want to roll it.
All right, you roll it. It is a 4. And 4 is randomness in video games.
Oh, we've been waiting to do this one for a while, yeah.
Yeah. Normally we talk about a lot of nonsense, but this is actual computer randomness now.
Well, we've been mixing it up. We've been kind of doing one on, one off. Like one fluff, one serious kind of, I don't know. Anyway.
But not like A, B, A, B, A, B, because
Right.
that wouldn't be random. That would be a pattern.
No.
Your listener challenge this week is to figure out the pattern in our episodes.
It's a secret message. But the secret message doesn't reveal itself for 100 episodes. That's really not on there very well. Anyway, randomness in video games. I think we were trying to remember if I did this on the podcast before. I can't remember if I talked about the types of randomness, but I want to go over them really quick as a precursor to kind of the rest of this. So there are 5 types of randomness. Well, 4 types of randomness, but there's a 0. So 0 is fixed numbers or known outcomes.
That would be not at all random.
Correct, yes. And that's fully predictable either because it's a fixed process or because the outcome is known already. Type 1 is pseudo-random. It appears random, but comes from a deterministic process. Given enough time or knowledge, one can theoretically be reduced to type 0. Type 2 is non-fully reducible.
Reducible.
Yeah. So that's random outcomes where you can affect the probabilities, ergo by gaining information to narrow down the outcome space. Most, quote, real-world randomness falls into this category. Predicting healthcare outcomes was given as an example.
Mm-hmm. Which, as we talked about in an earlier episode, insurance is gambling. It cannot be legally distinguished from gambling.
Yep. Type 3, martingale random. Random outcomes where you cannot affect the probabilities. Quote, fair bet and a theoretical fair coin are cited as examples. So die rolls would fall under that.
Right.
And we've talked about that, how that is not random, and that's kind of leaning into this where it's not fully random.
It is just supremely unpredictable.
Correct. Or not predictable enough to be fun.
Not predictable enough to be fun?
Or unpredictable enough to be fun.
Right.
And then type 4 is real randomness. Type 3 randomness, where source is not only unknown, but is a priori unknowable.
Is there an example given for that one?
It says, quote, if type 4 randomness exists, then God plays dice.
That would be like when you throw up a tomato. When you throw up a tomato. Blah. No, when you throw a tomato up in the air, it falls down and hits the ground. But if one time you threw the tomato up in the air and it stayed there and turned purple, then that would be type 4 randomness.
Right. Or your doses have kicked in. So anyway, those are the 4 types of randomness in brief. And then we're going to talk about randomness in video games. With this is basically RNGesus. So RNGesus.
He's making little gestures in the air with his hand
like
that
that's
you
good
can't
for
see, and
podcasting.
it doesn't even tell me what you're saying.
RNG, random number generator.
Random number generator.
But they call it RNGesus.
Why do they call it RNGesus?
Because it's funny. But that's RNGesus versus Fortuna.
I'm not following this at all.
It's just a way of saying using. There we go. Fate-based simulation via technology versus actual fate or actual randomness.
Okay, but aren't they saying that actual randomness doesn't really exist? So why is there a difference between Fortuna and RNGesus?
Because it's a pun.
Okay, go on.
So the first type where you see randomness in video games is in the roguelike video games, which are a lot of 80s style platformers are like that, but the modern element is that the levels are all randomly generated and infinite. Right. So you just kind of play until you can't play anymore. And there's increasing difficulties and stuff like that, but it's all randomly generated.
Right.
And then you have a lot of strategy games, right, which are either turn-based or real-time strategy. I personally prefer the turn-based strategy games. Just
when you say strategy game, like what type of game is that?
It could be an RPG. It could be anything. But the strategy elements of those games are illustrated in that manner.
Great. Like Avernum, for instance, is a turn-based RPG. That would qualify, right?
Right. And then, real-time strategy, which I always turn it off. But there have been a lot of Dungeons and Dragons brand games that have allowed you to go back and forth between the two. And I just don't think that real-time strategy works in that kind of... Because it's not the same kind of strategy. Right. It's more reactive.
Right.
So, and then there's feel-good versus feel-bad randomness.
Do tell.
So feel-good randomness, you feel like you've been rewarded by randomness. And these are things that we're going to kind of talk about in other ways going forth, but these are like terms I'm trying to get out. Yeah. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. But so, and then feel bad randomness is where you feel punished by a random event.
Okay.
And they can be incorporeal to each other, but typically video games lean one way or the other as separate events.
Okay.
So like, for example, you finish a battle and you get a random prize.
Right. That's a feel-good randomness.
Right. And especially, there's some like percentage chance of a rare item to be in there or something that that you're hunting for, whereas feel bad randomness would be where there was some kind of abject, you got sick or something bad happened to you.
Or there's like a random creature encounter and it's like one of the creatures that's 2 levels higher than the other creatures on this level. But
these are the ways that randomness are used to give us an emotion, to affect us in that way. So random outcomes teach us how to plan for uncertainty and make us more competent strategic thinkers.
That is why you should make decisions randomly, because it prepares you and teaches you.
But in terms of video games especially, it's a lot of the articles I was reviewing and have boiled down to this synopsis. They were talking about how it took game developers in the video games, especially, a long time to really get a grip on strategy, because they're going for that endorphin, what do you call it? Dopamine, the dopamine spikes. But you can get those in a way that your brain gets that from learning, or finding patterns. It's typically how one learns, Right. But incorporating random outcomes that feel random, and that's the hard part, is that, and we're going to get into that more later, but the struggle with randomness in video games is, as we know, randomness can have pattern. We'll start to see false patterns. So you'll feel like you always get bad. You always get a bad output. You always get a bad output. You roll a 1 all the time, right? Or sometimes you get upswings. It's just randomness. That's how it works.
Did you know that octopuses have 3 hearts? Yeah. 2 pump blood to the gills, and the third pumps it to the rest of the body. When they swim, the heart that delivers blood to the body actually stops beating.
Wow, that's exactly the same thing.
It is. It's exactly the same.
You let me last thing. Randomness fosters the growth of creativity in games by providing safe opportunities to take risks and mechanisms to learn from those risks over time. Mm-hmm. This is kind of the cause for randomness. And random outcomes enhance meaning because they add a relatable human dimension of shared experience that acknowledges the role of chance in our successes and failures. Mm-hmm. So those are the ways that it's kind of the like I said, the case for randomness in video games and kind of declaring randomness in video games too. Which I can say, like, in a lot of video games that I play, I get really disappointed when they try to give you the illusion of choice, but really no matter what, you get sucked back into a script, which is...
Well, that's what you were talking about with when we did the random dungeon mastering episode. Mm-hmm. How if you're just following a pre-existing story, the characters have no real choice in the matter.
Right.
Same thing in video games.
Exactly. Yeah. And I
mean, it's straight. It seems to me that a video game without any randomness would just be a story. Like, what would there be to do? You would just succeed at the things that you were supposed to succeed at, and not succeed at the things. It would just be a movie then.
There's a skill-based element to it as well, right? So there's if between this point in the movie and this point in the movie, you get, you have to like have the skill to beat all the things up and then go on to the next part of the script, which it doesn't do a lot for me.
Right.
But actually I'll just cut ahead to Baldur's Gate because that's one of the first times that a team of developers have actually tried to give not only freedom of choice, but complete freedom of choice, which resulted in hundreds of thousands of hours of recording voiceovers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And a very unmanageable decision tree. Because literally in every meeting they would say, okay, they wouldn't say this, but basically, what's the asshole going to do? What's somebody going to try that they know they're not supposed to do, but they're going to try it? We're not going to prohibit them from doing that. And so they accounted for all those things, and they made decision trees that changed the storyline. I mean, there's a base storyline.
That sounds like a tremendous amount of effort. It was.
And they actually, I think it's part of the reason why they decided not to do another one.
Right. It's like honey. Honey never spoils. Archaeologists have found pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that are over 3,000 years old and still perfectly edible.
That's awesome. You've been waiting to do this for a while. But anyway, one of the things they did in Baldur's Gate, which is tailored randomness.
Tell me about tailored randomness.
So they have a karmic dice option. And when you roll a d20, you can either have the karmic dice option turned on or turned off. If you have it turned off, you get what you get. Mm-hmm. With it on, so karmic dice operates in a success-failure system. The more you succeed, the more likely you are to fail.
So it gives you a balance. Instead of complete randomness,
right?
It gives you a balance.
The normal d20 rolls were average around 10 to 11. The thing with karmic dice is it will take your ability bonuses into account to determine an outcome. For example, if you need a 7 to succeed and you have a +6 modifier, the only way you can fail is by rolling a 1. Mm-hmm. If karmic dice is on and you roll 10 times, roughly 50% of those rolls will be a 1.
Why?
Because rolling a 1 is the only possible way you fail.
Oh, because you can't succeed every time because you have karmic dice on.
Correct.
So it will give you an inordinate number of 1s so that you fail as many times as you succeed.
And the inverse is also true. Mm-hmm. So if you fail successively, then you
won't continue to do that.
Correct. But it actually is less in your favor than randomness.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, with karmic dice off, you will pass 90 to 100% of those rolls because rolling a 1 is only a 5% natural chance of occurring.
Right.
And when you get high up there,
you've got a lot of bonuses.
Yeah. And they allow you to, they have a really nicely tuned interface to apply bonuses where they like are suggesting all the things you can do. But with Karmic Dice turned on, it's like even if you apply all these bonuses, you're going to just fluff every time.
Yeah.
That was not explicitly explained. I just knew very quickly that I didn't like Karmic Dice. Another way that random number generation is used is in to prevent save scrumming. Do you know what that is?
No.
It's where like every time right before something important happens, you save.
Uh-huh.
So if you don't like the outcome of an event,
you just go back to your save point.
Right. But what they do is they'll use.
But what you don't realize is that you're actually just jumping a universe, and you actually did all the things you thought you were saving yourself from doing.
Yep. See, Rick and Morty episode. No. But what they'll do is it's called random seed fixing, where there's a random seed that is introduced that prevents the influence of the seed scrumming. So you can't actually. It removes some freedom from that. So that otherwise, but some games encourage it. Some games are like, save as much as you want. You know?
And speaking of seeds, bananas are technically berries, and strawberries technically aren't berries. How crazy is that?
It's because strawberries aren't real.
Strawberries are made of birds.
XCOM. Have you ever heard of that game?
No.
It was. It's a real-time strategy game that incorporated random number generation into all of your, like, when you shoot somebody. Mm-hmm. And they're one of the first games to be really blatant about it, where, you know, it's not a die roll that you see, but it's a die roll that happens. Mm-hmm. And that game is a hard mistress.
Well, I was going to say that makes it hard. Well, we were talking earlier, like that's kind of what I meant when you were like saying like skill is what gets you some choice. But in this case, it's like take all the skill out of it. Because like you can think you're learning how to shoot people in the game, but it's still subject to a die roll. So like just
right.
A lot of times you just miss for no reason.
Yeah. And yeah, we can get into that more later, but I was trying to keep this kind of short.
Yeah.
But because there's a lot to talk about with randomness and the way they use it in XCOM. That was one of the landmark games for this. So, and of course, random number generation technology has been getting better every year, you know, and the numbers are more random. And it's just a way to incorporate that in a way that feels a certain way. Because that feel is a big part of that. But one of the games I really wanted to talk about a lot is Marvel Snap.
That's the one about sea otters, right?
Yes. It's completely sea otters. All the sea otters put keys in the fishbowl. Oh, you really distracted me with that. So anyway, the Marvel Snap is a game. It's a card game. It's a collectible card game. But there's a lot of randomness that happens as part of the game, including there's, so in brief, there's like 3 lands, like 3 columns that you play in, and you have 12 cards, and you have like points, and each card costs a number of points, and the points go up each time, and cards have powers, and they all have different specific powers and stuff like that. And we'll go through the whole thing of why that game's so cool, but it really is, because it ends up being a really good strategy game. And the strategy has so many random elements. First of all, there's a ton of cards. There's so many different ways to use different cards. They're very versatile, and they, you know, buff each other. But they do have so each of the columns that you play on has what's called the land, and it has an effect as well. And those are on somewhat of a random rotation. Now, whenever I say random, when I'm talking about Marvel Snap, it's all percentage based. And they definitely lean things, and they actually monthly release updates, and they will change the way the cards work, and they will change the way different things work based on how they feel the game is working as a living organism. And they study like the meta of the game and the percentages and how certain things are done and how certain, you know, they don't need to solicit feedback from people. They can tell statistically how things are going.
Right.
Which is something I've never really heard of anybody putting that much effort into.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's like what Google does with the map and how like it knows where everybody who using Google Maps is. And so they give you your route based on they're actually now controlling, instead of just telling you where to go, they're now controlling traffic and making sure no one route gets too overloaded.
Yeah.
Sounds like similar to that.
Yeah, kind of. So, and then they have things like the quantum tunnel, where when you play a card there, that card disappears and a random card is selected from your deck.
Oh.
And is played instead.
Weird.
Yeah, it's really weird. And
is the quantum tunnel a card? Or
no,
is that
it's a
something
land.
that happens?
If you play something on that column or that land, that card goes away and is replaced by another card from your deck at random.
Do you have to play a card there ever?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because you have to have the most points in 2 out of 3 columns to win a game.
Okay. And
then they also have what's called snapping, which is where you can bet, and then the number of cubes you win goes up based on that. They also have a retreat function that pisses me off constantly, but people just like play bluff hard and then run away at the last second. But they also have a land that after turn 5 blows up the ability to run away.
Neat.
And they just have tons of stuff like that. And then they have one of them is one of the lands is called Ego the Living Planet. And when Ego shows up, he plays your cards for you.
Isn't that the guy that was in the second Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell.
Yep. And basically the way that Ego feels random, but it's not random at all. It literally plays the first card it can in the first place that it can.
Oh.
And then there's another card called Agatha Harkness. And she's worth like 14 points, which is really high. Most of the cards are like in the 3 to 6 range, with 10 kind of being the highest. And there's, of course, a lot of exceptions to that, but I'm just generalizing. And when Agatha's in your hand, it used to be, when Agatha's in your hand, first of all, she always is put in your hand first. So if you have her in your selected deck, she's always
going to be in your first hand.
Yeah, and she plays your cards for you.
Oh.
And she does the same thing that Ego does. It's the first one and the first fails, and they ignore the way that cards interact and the way that the land interacts, which sometimes is just fucking stupid. But they changed that now because people just stopped using her.
I was going to say people probably complained.
Yeah. Well, no, they don't. It doesn't matter if people complain. They base it on use and statistics.
Oh, right.
And they try to make sure their cards are all following a certain rotation. And it's like really in depth.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Like it's not a sleep at the wheel, and it pisses people off all the time because they nerf a lot of cards because they come out and they're like, oh, this is way more powerful than we thought it was going to be. Or, oh, we knew it would combo with that, but we didn't think everybody would figure it out.
Right.
So now Agatha's been changed so that she only plays on your even turns. Okay. So on your odd turns, you can play whatever you want, but she's a 6-cost card, so she typically can't be played till the end of the game anyway. So you're kind of stuck with her, and then she plays herself.
That's pretty amazing because, like, we talk about how like technology changed games in that, like, well, I can play chess with somebody in a different country, or that kind of like more trivial dynamic. But this is like we are using the real time, like what people are actually doing in the game and making changes to the game, like constantly fine tuning the game based on what people are doing. And it appeared like you can't do that with Trivial Pursuit.
No.
They found out a bunch of those questions were wrong, but your card just doesn't automatically update.
Right.
You have to buy a new edition. But with this, it's like instantly delivered. They figure it out, they tweak it, and you're constantly playing like the latest beta version.
Exactly.
That's pretty awesome.
And there are times when it's pissed me off because a card that I really like in a deck that I really liked, they made a change and it just ruined it. But I understand it's always totally valid.
Right.
It's just whether or not, it's like, okay, well, that loophole's been taken away. I'll have to find a new one, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing that Marvel Snap gets into a lot of trouble with, as far as randomness is concerned, are what I mentioned, a lot of like the drop rates and stuff like that are based on percentages. And it's not one of these games where you can really buy your way to being good at the game, you can spend money on it for sure. You can spend a lot of money on it if you want. But it's pretty well tempered that, with a few exceptions, like a few of the more powerful cards in the game, if you weren't in the game when that was released, you can't get it. But I don't see that as pay to win, as a lot of people like to say. It's more, you have to be there. Like, if you've been playing this game for 2 years, you have an advantage, and you probably should.
Yeah. But also, they don't let it be too much of an advantage, because they can change it after the fact if it becomes abused.
Correct.
Yeah.
But as far as the reward system is concerned, if you pay like the monthly subscription, which is like $10, then you're pretty well fed most of the good cards when they come out. And there's a whole thing we want to get into, but that's the big thing about Marvel, and then also just manipulated randomness in general, and how there's been a trend towards predatory tactics where percentages are based. So it would be like, spin this wheel to get a prize, and all the slices are the same. I mean, this is an allegory, right? But all the slices look the same size.
But they're not the same likelihood of coming up. Right.
Correct.
Well, that's like when they used to do those like soda pop bottle top games where you have to collect the name, the letters in Motorama to make it as...
or the Monopoly game at McDonald's.
Make an oblique reference to a very weird underground movie that I'm still not sure whether I like it or not. Anyhow, there's a like, you have to collect, each cap has a letter on it, and you have to collect the whole word. And if it was like Motorama, it would be like you would have hundreds of M's, O's, T's, and A's, but the R would be extremely rare, and that's basically the winning piece. But they make you think like, oh, just like collect the bottle caps and make the word, but they skew the odds on you.
Well, this is worse.
That's how they get you.
This is even worse, because we were talking about is just skewing the percentages, which is commonplace and it's acceptable. I mean, most of them have to declare the odds, right? So if they at least show the odds of winning, they're inadvertently or kind of one layer away from revealing the percentages involved.
Right.
If you're paying attention. What I'm talking about are games that dynamically change based on your behavior and learn what it takes to get you to spend money.
Oh, well, of course they're going to do that.
The game design company Nexon was fined $9 million for manipulating the odds of their loot boxes to optimize spending opportunities.
Yeah, that seems like a legal gray area to me.
Well, it's. I think it just comes down to disclosure, and deception, and are you saying this is a random thing that happens and you can actually have a chance of winning, or and the fact that it's shaped based on player activity, that's pretty nefarious. Like, I could understand if it was shaped based on everyone's behavior, like if too many people, like a slot machine, if too many people are winning, then we'd reduce the odds, and vice versa. But if it's that actual person learning where the sweet spot is to starve them to get them to spend $5,
right?
That's when it gets nasty. So
yeah, that is a little nefarious.
And I can put a link in our show notes about predatory tactics in gaming are worse than you think. That'll go into this, because it literally in the beginning of this article has a TLDR.
Oh yeah,
because they go through like all of the stuff and what is the definition of predatory, and But I found it very interesting. The other thing too is all games now, especially multiplayer games, have to use some form of bots.
Why?
Because otherwise your game success is based on popularity. So if a game starts out and there's nobody there.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
you've got to have other players in order for the multiplayer to work.
Right. And Marvel Snap does that intentionally. Actually, like the first, I think it's the first 10 levels, you play nothing but bots.
Wow. Until
your deck builds up to a certain level where you can be kind of released into a staged wild. And they do that. They're based on like you have a collection level. And so you compete against people in a similar collection level as you are, as well as like they do a lot of matchmaking tactics like that. Not only what is your current goal, right? You know, if you're trying to get to 90, like it goes in increments of 10 wins. And so, you know, when you stage, that helps pair you with somebody else as well as your collection level.
Wow, it's insanely complex.
That's why it's so fucking good.
Right.
I play that game every day. I love that game.
That's awesome.
I've played that game probably every day for the last 2 years.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's a good game.
All right.
And plus, the games are designed to be like less than 5 minutes, so you can just sit down.
Yeah, it doesn't absorb a lot of your time. You can just like do it here and there on a break or whatever.
Exactly.
Nice.
Exactly. So I think that's all I have to say about that in the overview, and we can get more in depth with that later.
All right. Well, then we need to issue a listener challenge. And I did make note of the games you mentioned. I may have missed one. Roguelike is a class of games. Do you have one that you would recommend to be on the list?
I don't really like those games.
Yeah, but do you have an example of one so I can put it on the damn list?
No.
Then I will say, what is it? No, it's not Fable. Is it Fable? What's the one where you're in the underworld and what happened? Like you keep getting, like when you die, you get reincarnated, but the game is not the same. It like evolves based on what you did in your last run. I don't remember what that game is called.
Let's see. Well, there's the 1980 game Rogue.
Can people still get that?
No.
I mean, there's NetHack if we want to go back that far.
Yep, that's on the list.
Yeah.
Here, yeah. Let's see, what are modern? I mean, Diablo is considered an edge case. Slay the Spire was awesome, actually. That's actually a roguelike card game where I can highly recommend that game. Slay the Spire is
Hades.
awesome.
I think Hades is what I was thinking of.
Yep.
And I think there's a Hades 2 now, right?
Yep.
So I'll give you your choice of Hades or Hades 2, dear listener, when you roll, because choice 1 will be Hades or Hades 2. Choice 2 will be XCOM.
Is XCOM considered a roguelike? Oh, no.
No,
okay, yeah.
Number 1 was roguelike, yeah.
Gotcha.
So number 1 is Hades or Hades 2. Number 2 is XCOM. Number 3 is Baldur's Gate. And number 4...
Baldur's Gate 3 specifically, I should say.
Oh, Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
And number 4 is Marvel Snap. This will require you to obtain or possess a 4-sided die. Or, of course, you can always go to yard.quest/tools and use the tool there to generate a random number from 1 to 4. That is your listener challenge. Thanks for listening. Please tell a friend. Give us a good review, even though we may or may not deserve it. And I'm going to end with an amazing fact. Did you know that the Eiffel Tower can grow or shrink by up to 6 inches? And I'm not going to tell you why. You'll just have to figure it out.